So for anyone out there trying to navigate, personal wellness, trying to get more energy, sharper focus, maybe just feel consistently better, you probably come across tons of different approaches.
Oh, absolutely.
But what if there was like a surprisingly straightforward way, something backed by science that could actually bring about these big shifts, but without, the strict diets or counting calories?
Yeah, it almost sounds, well, a bit too good to be true, doesn't it?
Hmm.
So today our mission is really to take a deep dive into something called the glucose goddess method. And this isn't just, another fleeting wellness trend. It's designed as a practical guide. And it's really rooted in quite extensive scientific research on blood sugar.
Okay.
So we're here to basically distill the most crucial insights, the actionable strategies from this material, to empower you with knowledge that could be, well, truly transformative.
Okay, let's unpack that then. The core idea here, you're saying, is something most of us actually experience, but we don't even realize it. These glucose spikes?
Exactly. There are these really rapid increases in blood sugar right after we eat. And yeah, they often fly completely under the radar.
Right.
But kind of quietly, they can contribute to this huge range of, well, frustrating daily symptoms. You mentioned fatigue, brain fog.
Yeah, that afternoon slump.
Totally. That, and even potentially serious long-term health challenges down the line.
And the key thing is, it's not just for people who have a diagnosis like diabetes.
No, that's critical. This impacts everyone. But look,
Oh.
the good news, and this is the focus of the method, is that it offers these really straightforward hacks.
Hacks, okay.
Yeah, things that are genuinely easy to integrate into daily life. And as you'll see, no strict diets, no calorie counting involved. But the results people report are pretty powerful, tangible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal today is basically to equip you with a clear understanding of what these hacks are and, the profound impact they can have. So you leave this deep dive feeling informed and hopefully ready to try some things out.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start at the beginning then. Glucose. It's our main fuel, right? Powers everything from thinking to moving.
It is, yeah, undeniably.
But is it really as simple as just more glucose equals more energy? Or is there something like a nuance we're missing?
You've hit on a really key misunderstanding there. Glucose, yeah, it mainly comes from carbs, starchy stuff, sugary stuff, and it is vital fuel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the dynamics. It's how we get it and use it that makes the difference between health and, well, dysfunction.
Okay.
The source material uses this great analogy. Think of a plant. It needs water, right?
Mm-hmm.
But too much water all at once will actually kill it.
Right. Drowns it.
Exactly. And our bodies are kind of similar with glucose. We need it, but too much arriving too quickly.
Yeah.
That leads to this cascade of problems.
And those problems, those are the glucose spikes we mentioned. It's kind of wild how common this is. You said U.S. estimates are like 80%.
Yeah, about 80% of the population experiencing these rapid surges after eating. It's huge.
So for most of us then, who are probably on this glucose roller coaster without knowing it, what's actually happening inside our bodies during one of these spikes?
Okay, so it starts right down at the cellular level with our
The
mitochondria.
powerhouses of the cell, right?
Exactly. Those little engines, when glucose floods in really fast, they just get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about making you tired in that moment. It actually triggers cellular stress, inflammation.
Inflammation again? Okay.
Yeah, and it significantly reduces their ability to produce energy efficiently.
Yeah.
So that directly translates to that feeling of, chronic fatigue that so many people struggle with.
So the energy crash isn't just like a sugar low, it's deeper. It's the cells being stressed out.
Precisely.
And the source mentioned something about accelerated aging, even wrinkles. How does a glucose spike lead to that?
Right, so that's down to something called glycation.
Mhm.
Basically, excess glucose starts damaging proteins in your body, makes them stiff. Think of it like sugar caramelizing, but happening inside you. Yeah. It's an internal aging accelerator. It affects everything from your skin's elasticity, leading to wrinkles, sagging, but also like the deterioration of internal organs. And every spike, especially from really sugary foods, speeds up this internal cooking process and ramps up inflammation everywhere.
So we're feeling bad and potentially aging faster internally.
Wow. Okay, then there's insulin. We hear about insulin mostly with diabetes, but what's its immediate job when a spike hits?
Insulin is, it's like your body's protector. It's heroic in a way. When glucose surges, your pancreas releases insulin to quickly get that excess glucose out of the bloodstream.
To protect the cells from that overload in glycation?
Exactly. It tries to mitigate the damage. And insulin's job is to basically shuttle that extra glucose away for storage into your liver, your muscles, and importantly, into your fat cells.
The fat cells.
Yeah. And here's the catch, the often overlooked part. while insulin is doing this protective job short term, its very presence actually switches off your body's ability to burn fat.
Switches it off, turns it off. So over time, if you have constantly high insulin levels because of frequent spikes, it can lead to hormonal imbalances and eventually, yeah, increase the risk for things like type 2 diabetes.
Wow. So the body's own protective mechanism has this sort of unintended consequence. That's fascinating. And this whole dynamic, this sort of double-edged sword, is underpinning a lot of the frustrating symptoms people feel day to day.
Absolutely. It's the root cause for many of them.
So let's talk about those symptoms. What does this glucose roller coaster actually feel like for people?
Well, one of the most common things, and honestly one of the most frustrating, is intense cravings and constant hunger.
Mm-hmm.
There's research, Yale University actually, showing that when your glucose levels are nice and stable, the craving center in your brain is pretty quiet.
Okay.
But when your glucose drops sharply after a big spike, that craving center lights right up. Suddenly you desperately want foods you might not normally even think about.
So that's the physiological basis for feeling hangry. It's not just in your head.
Exactly. It's a real physical response. Yeah. And it ties into hormones too. Leptin, that's the hormone that tells you you're full, it gets blocked.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, ghrelin, the hunger hormone, basically takes over.
Oh, man.
It creates this really unfortunate kind of vicious cycle. Weight gain can actually lead to more hunger because of these hormonal shifts.
That sounds really unfair.
It is. But what's fascinating and counterintuitive is the solution often isn't about trying to eat less. It's about eating more food, but in specific ways that help lower those insulin levels and break that cycle of constant hunger.
Eating more food to be less hungry. That's a big takeaway right there. Okay, so cravings, hunger. What about energy levels? We mentioned chronic fatigue from the mitochondria. Anything else?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of people talk about food comas, right? That overwhelming need for a nap after eating.
Oh, yeah, the post-lunch slump.
That's often a direct result of a big spike and the subsequent crash. And the testimonials from people using this method really highlight a change here. People report having sustained energy all day long. No more crashing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, one person actually said they used to plan their chores around this expected 2 p.m. slump, and now they just have energy consistently.
That's life-changing. Okay, so the physical stuff is clear. Energy, cravings. But what about things that feel more mental, like our mood, or how clearly we can think? How does glucose get involved there?
That's a really crucial connection. Think about it. Your brain doesn't have pain nerves like your skin, right? It can't just yell, ouch, I'm out of whack.
Right.
So often when the brain is struggling, maybe due to energy supply issues from erratic glucose, it signals that distress in ways we perceive as, say, anxiety or just a persistently low mood.
Wow.
And studies back this up. There's a clear link shown between having really erratic glucose levels and reporting more depressive symptoms. Mood swings, too, that irritability, feeling hangry, as we said, that's often tied to irregular glucose. It can even affect levels of tyrosine, which is a neurotransmitter linked to better mood.
So the feedback from users reflects this.
Oh, absolutely. It's compelling. People say things like they feel happier, or my depression and anxiety seem more under control, or even I feel much more zen.
That's profound. It really shows how tightly linked our physical state and mental state are. What about brain fog specifically? That feeling of not being able to concentrate, feeling confused.
Yeah, that's another big one.
Mm.
Over the long term, these chronic glucose roller coasters can actually damage the tiny blood vessels and neurons in the brain. This leads to decreased cognitive function, memory issues, and yeah, that feeling of pervasive brain fog.
Is that related to the Alzheimer's connection I've heard about?
It is. Very strongly. The connection is so significant that Alzheimer's is sometimes even called type 3 diabetes. And we know that insulin resistance developing in midlife is a pretty clear predictor of cognitive decline later on. But the encouraging part is flattening these glucose curves can lead to noticeable improvements in mental clarity.
Okay. What about outward appearance? Skin health. We mentioned wrinkles from glycation.
Right. Glycation and inflammation, both fueled by glucose spikes, are major accelerators of visible aging. Damaged collagen means sagging skin, wrinkles. It can also affect joints, make them inflamed. And beyond aging, that inflammation from glucose spikes is directly linked to a whole host of common skin conditions, things like acne, rosacea, eczema, psoriasis.
Really? Acne too?
Yeah. One user reported it as a surprising side effect. Their acne just dramatically decreased. Another saw big improvements in their eczema really quickly, like within the first week.
That's huge for conditions that can be so stubborn.
Right.
Okay, let's shift to hormones and reproductive health. This feels like another major area where glucose plays a big role.
It really is. These glucose fluctuations are deeply connected to issues like PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome,
Right.
also fibroids, endometriosis, difficult PMS, even missed periods. A lot of this comes down to excess insulin, signaling the ovaries to produce more testosterone than they should.
And that causes problems.
Yeah, and for many women with PCOS, it also makes weight loss incredibly difficult because that high insulin keeps the body in fat storage mode.
But the flip side is, if you can reduce the insulin by managing glucose, you can potentially alleviate these symptoms.
Exactly. And the source shares some really powerful stories here. One woman whose period returned after years of being absent. Another who struggled with PCOS and fertility for a long time, and then conceived naturally after adopting these glucose-steadying habits.
Wow. That's incredible.
It really is, and it extends to other life stages too. Menopause symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia. Those are often made worse by high or unstable glucose levels.
Mm.
Flattening the curves can really help manage those.
Mm-hmm.
And then for pregnancy, gestational diabetes is directly linked to insulin levels. While the method can potentially help reduce medication needs and improve outcomes, it's absolutely crucial always to work closely with your doctor or care team during pregnancy.
Absolutely. Doctor consultation is key there, so it really touches on hormonal health across the board. What about diabetes itself, beyond the gestational kind?
Right. So for type 1 diabetes, where the body doesn't make insulin, flattening the glucose curves doesn't cure it, obviously. But it can significantly lessen the day-to-day burden of managing those extreme highs and lows. But again, super important to work with a doctor on any insulin dosage adjustments.
Makes sense.
But for insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, and type 2 diabetes, the connection is even more direct. That's often the progression. Frequent glucose spikes lead to insulin resistance, which can become prediabetes and then potentially develop into full-blown type 2 diabetes.
Now, you mentioned something truly staggering earlier, the potential to reverse type 2 diabetes. That sounds almost revolutionary. How does the method actually achieve that?
It is revolutionary, but the science is there. A major review in 2021 looked at 23 different clinical trials. The conclusion: flattening glucose curves is the single most effective way to put type 2 diabetes into remission.
Wow, the most effective way.
Yeah, and there's an incredible testimonial in the source material about someone whose HbA1c, that's a measure of average blood sugar, over about 3 months went from 9.6, which is well into the diabetic range, down to 4.7, which is completely normal, all within 4 months of using these hacks. It effectively resolved their diabetes.
That is absolutely life-changing potential.
It really is. And of course, as we keep stressing, for anyone managing a condition like diabetes or making significant dietary changes, working with your healthcare provider is essential.
Understood. Okay, the impact is clearly huge for diabetes. But it doesn't stop there, does it? What about other really serious long-term conditions like cancer or Alzheimer's?
No, the ripples extend further. Poor diet is implicated as a major driver in about half of all cancers.
Yeah.
Glucose spikes contribute in a few ways. Stressed mitochondria produce more free radicals, which can damage DNA. Inflammation, fueled by spikes, can promote cancer spread. And higher insulin levels themselves can actually accelerate cancer growth.
That's sobering.
It is. The data shows, for instance, that people without diabetes have roughly half the likelihood of dying from cancer compared to those with prediabetes.
And the Alzheimer's link. You called it type 3 diabetes earlier.
Yeah, the connection is just so strong. Excess glucose damages brain neurons and blood vessels over time. It causes inflammation, glycation, that internal cooking, and insulin resistance within the brain itself.
Right.
People with type 2 diabetes have about 4 times the risk of developing Alzheimer's. And as I mentioned, insulin resistance showing up in midlife is a clear warning sign for future cognitive decline. But again, there's hope. Studies show that glucose-steadying diets can lead to both short-term and long-term improvements in memory and cognitive function for patients.
Okay, so we've really explored the depth of the problem, how these glucose spikes affect everything from our daily energy to our long-term health risks. Now let's get into the solution, the glucose goddess method. You said it's not a restrictive diet.
That's absolutely key. It's a core part of the philosophy. This is not a diet. It's not about restriction. There is absolutely no calorie counting. The whole focus is on health and healing your body from the inside out. It's about how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, a lot of participants are really surprised because weight loss often happens as a side effect, even when it wasn't the main goal. In the pilot study, 38% of people who wanted to lose weight did so, even while eating more food than they were used to.
Eating more and losing weight, that just goes against everything we usually hear.
I know, it challenges that conventional eat less, move more paradigm in a really interesting way.
So how did this method come about? It wasn't the author's first work, right?
No, exactly. Her first book, Glucose Revolution,
Mm.
laid out a lot of the science. But it generated this huge demand from people wanting a really practical step-by-step plan. Like, okay, I get the science, now tell me exactly what to do. People joked they wanted her to move in with them.
Huh.
So this method is basically the answer to that. And it's not just theory. It was built on and refined through this big pilot experiment. They had 2,700 people participate from 110 different countries, all ages from 20s to 70s.
Wow, that's extensive.
It really is. And maybe the most telling statistic, 99% of those people were still using the hacks after the official 4-week study ended.
99%. That speaks volumes about how doable it must be.
Exactly. It shows they're not just quick fixes you suffer through for a month. They're designed to be sustainable, to become lifelong habits.
Okay, let's get into them then. The 4 foundational hacks. You called them gentle giants?
Yeah, that's the term used. They were selected from a larger pool of potential hacks specifically because they have a really powerful impact, but they're also relatively easy to implement. And the method introduces them gradually, 1 per week over 4 weeks.
Okay, week 1. What's the first gentle giant?
Week 1 is savory breakfast. The goal is simple. Eat a savory breakfast every single day. The meal should be built around protein and fat. You can have some optional whole fruit or maybe a small amount of starch for flavor, but, and this is key, no other sweet items. No sugary cereals, no pastries, no juice.
Right.
And the aim is to eat enough so that you stay feeling full for about 4 hours afterwards.
Now, most of us, or at least a lot of us, grew up thinking breakfast should be sweet. Cereal, toast and jam, pancakes, quick energy to start the day. Why ditch that?
Yeah, it's a really common misconception, but it actually sets us up for a tough day, glucose-wise. A sweet or starchy breakfast causes the biggest glucose spike of the entire day.
The biggest. Why first thing in the morning?
Because your body's in a fasted state overnight, it's more sensitive to glucose. So that big morning spike leads to an almost inevitable energy crash mid-morning, and it also messes up your glucose regulation for the rest of the day, triggering more cravings later on. A savory breakfast, on the other hand, built on protein and fat, does the opposite. It keeps your glucose much more stable. It helps curb those mid-morning cravings and provides steady, sustained energy. It avoids that big initial peak in the subsequent valley.
So starting savory really sets a completely different metabolic tone for the whole day.
Makes sense. How does this look practically for listeners? What kind of things can they eat?
The method encourages experimentation. Find what works for you. The source gives examples like, a simple 2-egg omelet, maybe some halloumi cheese with veggies, even leftovers like a chickpea stew or an upgraded avocado toast, maybe with eggs or smoked salmon.
Okay, lots of options.
Yeah, the key is finding something you enjoy and adjusting the portion size so you genuinely feel full for those 4 hours. And the great part about week 1 is that's the only change. Lunch, dinner, snacks, they stay flexible while you focus just on mastering the savory breakfast.
And people noticed a difference quickly. Oh yeah, testimonials really highlight this. Things like, changing my breakfast has set my day on a whole new trajectory. Or simply, I have energy all day long now. It's often the first big aha moment for people.
Okay, that sounds doable and impactful. So building on that savory breakfast foundation, what happens in week 2?
Week 2 introduces vinegar. So you keep doing the savory breakfast every day, and now you add 1 tablespoon of vinegar daily.
Just 1 tablespoon of vinegar. That sounds almost too simple to be effective.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's deceptively powerful. The science comes down to acetic acid, which is the active component in vinegar.
Acetic acid.
Okay. It works in 2 main ways. First, it actually slows down how quickly carbohydrates are broken down and digested. So glucose enters your bloodstream more slowly, more gently. Less of a spike. Second, and this is really cool, it encourages your muscles to take up glucose directly from the bloodstream without needing extra insulin.
Without insulin.
The muscles can just grab it when they're working, and acetic acid seems to enhance this process. So the combined effect can reduce the glucose spike from a meal by up to 30%, and the corresponding insulin spike by up to 20%.
Wow, 30% reduction. That's huge from just vinegar. And less insulin
Means your body has more opportunity to switch into fat-burning mode.
Gotcha. Okay, so how do people actually incorporate this? Do you just, drink a spoonful of vinegar?
You could, but most people find easier ways. It's really versatile. You can dilute it in a glass of water, maybe first thing in the morning or before a meal. You can add it to sparkling water for a kind of shrub or mocktail. Put it in herbal tea, or just use it in a salad dressing on your food.
So timing matters. Is it best before eating?
The optimal time is about 10 minutes before you eat a meal that contains carbs or sugars, but it still provides benefits even if you have it during the meal or even right after. So don't stress too much if you forget beforehand.
Okay. And what if someone really hates the taste of vinegar?
Good question. If you really can't stand it, the source suggests using lemon juice instead. It contains citric acid, which has somewhat similar, though likely less potent, effects. It's a decent alternative.
Good to have an option.
Yeah.
And what did the pilot participants say about this hack?
They loved it. A common comment was something like, "The vinegar has been a game changer for long-lasting satiety." Many noted a significant drop in their cravings, especially for sweets, once they started incorporating it.
Interesting. Okay, savory breakfast, daily vinegar. What's week 3?
Week 3 brings in the veggie starter. So you continue with the savory breakfast and the vinegar hack, and now you add a vegetable-based dish like a small salad, some cooked veggies, even a veggie soup before either lunch or dinner. Just one meal a day to start.
So eating your veggies first. What's the science behind changing the order of your food?
The magic ingredient here is fiber. The Force calls fiber the glucose superwoman, which I love.
Oh, okay.
When you eat fiber-rich vegetables at the very beginning of a meal, that fiber creates this kind of viscous mesh in your stomach and intestines.
A mesh.
Yeah, like a protective net. And this mesh physically slows down the absorption of glucose from all the other food you eat afterwards, the starches, the sugars. It blunts the spike significantly.
How significantly?
There was one study cited that's just remarkable. Simply by changing the order of eating, having the vegetables first, then protein and fat, then carbs last, they saw a 75% reduction in the overall glucose spike compared to eating the same foods but with carbs first.
75%. Just by changing the order. That's incredible. You don't even have to change what you eat.
Exactly. That's the power of it. It's not about eliminating foods. It's about sequencing them strategically.
So how much veg are we talking for this starter? Does it have to be a huge salad?
No, the guideline is roughly 30% of the total volume of your meal. It can be really simple, like some raw carrot sticks and cucumber with hummus or guacamole. That's the express fiber option.
Okay, nice and easy.
Or you could do something slightly more involved, like a small side salad, some steamed broccoli, or leftover roasted vegetables. The source has recipes for things like a cauliflower salad, or even a 5-min soup.
And batch cooking could help here.
Definitely. Cook up a big batch of roasted veggies or make a large salad base at the start of the week. And here's a bonus tip. If you put a vinegar-based dressing on your veggie starter.
Ah, you knock out 2 hacks at once.
Exactly. Very efficient.
Smart.
Yeah.
What was the feedback on this one? Was it harder for people to stick to?
Initially, maybe it feels like an extra step, but people quickly saw the benefits. Comments like, "This made a big difference to my appetite later in the meal," or "My cravings reduced significantly when I started doing this." There was also this realization, one person put it as, "It just doesn't make sense not to prepare my body for the food I will eat."
That's a great way to think about it, like putting on armor before the glucose arrives. Okay, this actually brings up a bonus insight mentioned in the method about dessert. Why is eating dessert after a meal, especially one with a veggie starter, better than having that same sweet thing on an empty stomach?
Right. It comes back to that protective fiber mesh and the other food already in your system. When sugar comes last, its glucose hits your bloodstream much more slowly because the fiber, protein, and fat from the main meal are already there, slowing things down.
Ah, buffering the impact.
Exactly. That fiber mesh plays a huge role. So you can still enjoy that piece of cake or chocolate, but the glucose spike and the subsequent crash in cravings will be much less dramatic than if you ate it alone as a snack. It optimizes the timing.
Clever. Okay, we've got savory breakfast, vinegar, veggie starter. What's the final hack in week 4?
Week 4 is movement after eating. So you keep doing the other 3 hacks, and now you add just 10 minutes of light movement within about 90 minutes after one of your main meals each day.
10 minutes of movement. That sounds very achievable. What's the science here? How does moving after eating help?
It's all about what your muscles do with glucose. If you just sit still after a meal, any excess glucose that isn't immediately needed gets readily stored, often as fat, thanks to insulin.
Right.
But if you get up and move, your muscles start contracting. And contracting muscles need energy. They start actively pulling glucose out of your bloodstream to use as fuel right then and there.
Ah, they burn it off immediately.
Exactly. And here's the really neat part. When muscles are actively contracting, they can take up glucose without needing more insulin.
Oh, interesting. So you lower the glucose spike and you don't increase insulin.
Correct. It's a double win. You flatten the curve, You encourage your body to stay in fat-burning mode because insulin isn't spiking as high, and you also combat that sluggish food coma feeling.
Okay, so what kind of movement counts? Does it have to be like a run or going to the gym?
Absolutely not. The emphasis is on making it feel like a treat, not a chore. Any kind of muscle activation works. A brisk 10-minute walk is fantastic. Maybe walk while you take a phone call, or run a quick errand on foot. Doing the dishes counts, vacuuming a room, climbing a few flights of stairs, dancing to a couple of songs, playing with your kids or pets.
Even cleaning. Nice.
Yeah. And there's even a great tip for people who are maybe stuck at a desk. Seated calf raises. Just lifting your heels up and down. It activates a muscle in your calf called the soleus, which is apparently surprisingly good at soaking up blood glucose.
Seated calf raises. Anyone can do that.
Pretty much. The key is just 10 minutes using your muscles within that 90-minute window after one meal.
And the feedback on this final hack?
Really positive. People said things like, when I started the movement, it changed everything, or movement after meals definitely makes me happier and feel lighter. It often ties all the other hacks together. And importantly, even if you already exercise regularly, adding this short bout of movement after a meal still provides unique, targeted benefits for managing that post-meal glucose response.
That's a great point. It's not replacing other exercise, it's complementary. Okay, so those are the 4 hacks, layered in week by week. You've made it through the 4 weeks, you understand the science, you've integrated these habits, but the journey doesn't just stop there, right? This isn't about being rigid forever.
No, absolutely not. That's crucial. This method is designed for real life. The philosophy holds. No foods are totally off limits. There's still no calorie counting. You can absolutely still enjoy pizza or have a drink or eat birthday cake.
Right.
The method talks about the 80% rule. Aim to implement the hacks most of the time, maybe 80% or so. If it's an odd day here or there, it's no big deal. These are meant to become lifelong, flexible habits, not a strict all-or-nothing diet that you're inevitably going to fall off.
That flexibility is probably why that 99% stuck with it. So what about cravings? Even with the hacks, they might still pop up sometimes. How do you navigate them with this new awareness? You mentioned that hangry feeling.
Yeah, cravings can still happen. The method suggests trying a 20-minute cooling off period. Often, that initial intense urge that hits after a glucose dip will actually subside on its own within about 20 minutes as your liver releases stored glucose to stabilize things.
Ah, wait it out a bit.
Exactly. Give it 20 minutes. Yeah. Then you can ask yourself more calmly, okay, do I genuinely want this food right now? Or was that just a physiological blip or maybe just habit?
Makes sense.
If the craving is still there and you really want the food, you now have tools. You know you can eat it as dessert after a proper meal. Or you can try to clothe it, meaning eat it alongside some protein, fat, or fiber to buffer the impact.
Right.
Or you could have a vinegar drink before you eat it. Or make sure you move your body for 10 minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
It gives you control and options instead of feeling powerless against the craving.
That's really empowering. It's not about restriction, but about informed choices.
Exactly.
So the idea is, after the 4 weeks, these hacks are basically in your back pocket forever.
That's the phrase used, yeah. They become tools you understand. You can decide which ones become daily non-negotiables for you and which ones you pull out strategically, maybe vinegar before a big pasta dinner or making sure you walk after a celebratory meal. It's about equipping you with strategies that lead to real, tangible improvements.
And those improvements are pretty wide-ranging based on everything we've discussed.
Hugely wide-ranging. Steadier glucose leads to more consistent energy, better brain function, improved fat-burning capability, potentially rebalanced hormones, reduced symptoms across the board. It really is about thriving from the inside out.
Amazing. And just to reiterate that important point.
Yes, absolutely. We always emphasize consulting with your doctor or your healthcare team, especially if you have any underlying medical conditions or if you're taking medication. This deep dive is for informational purposes. It's not medical advice.
Perfect. So we've really journeyed through this glucose goddess method, and it feels like the potential transformation is quite incredible. Going from maybe feeling tired all the time, battling cravings, maybe dealing with skin issues or hormonal imbalances, to having clearer skin, balanced hormones, sustained energy. It's huge.
It really is. The promise is that your body, which might have felt like this confusing black box of symptoms before,
Right.
can start to feel like a trusted partner again, one that you understand and know how to nourish properly.
Yeah, you're equipped now. You've got these powerful yet simple tools.
You're basically a master of your glucose now, ready to feel your best.
Love it. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to maybe leave our listeners thinking about. We've seen just how profoundly blood sugar impacts our physical health, our mental health, our energy, our appearance. Given all that, what other aspects of our lives might be silently influenced by our glucose levels in ways we're only just starting to grasp?
That's a fascinating question.
Could things like our relationships, our creativity, our decision-making, could they also be subtly shaped by these internal fluctuations? And how might gaining this deeper awareness lead to even more surprising, maybe even more profound shifts in our overall well-being in the future?